All right, so now you have heard more about the challenge, and Roy's going to start talking about some of the solutions.
Thank you. Put my timer on so I don't talk too much. Okay, so when you think of compliance, and some of these themes have already been touched on, there's all different types of compliance here. And what is that little thing there? Oh, there we go. So from the funding perspective, they want to know there's compliance with their mandates, and that's what matters to them. From the institutional perspective, yes, they need to report compliance so that they can get more funding, that great VP of research that we heard about earlier. And also institutions are paying publishers for discount schemes and things like that, so they'll get a discount for their faculty for APCs based on their overall spend or based on a particular deal that they work out where they pay a certain amount and that gives them a discount. Institutions want to see that those are complied with, or else they're going to be very, very upset having negotiated those. Now, the authors in this mix, compliance is important to them, but I would say of all the people here, all the 5 categories that I've listed, and there are more categories, of course, they're the ones who really should just be able to do what comply and never have to think about it, because we really want our researchers doing research. We really want them figuring out how to cure cancer or whatever it is that they're doing. We don't want them figuring out how to comply with an open access mandate. That is a big waste of time, and frankly something that will fail because they're just not going to care, because as we know, they are very important. Publishers, those of you who know me know that I come from a publisher perspective, and what I'm going to say about publishers is, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to get all the blame. So the funders aren't going to get blamed for the mandates, even if the mandates are hard to comply with. The institutions are just going to say it's all your fault, publishers. And so at the end of the day, the publishers, whether they want to or not, kind of need to have a solution. And the last piece of this is vendors, people like us who have, for better or for ill, and intelligently or unintelligently said, hey, this seems great, let's get involved. So these are the people who are all going to be trying to figure out how we're going to build these solutions for compliance. And in the vendor category, I would also put things like Chorus, which is essentially a compliance vendor of a sort. So vendors don't have to be commercial vendors or not-for-profit vendors like us. There's all different types of vendors in this space. So when we look at it, go back to the previous slide where the author is the one person who we really don't want to have to figure it out and don't think really will be able to figure it out. And therefore, we center our solution around the author, because if you center around anyone else, then the author has to shoehorn their way in. So the way we look at it is, and for those of you who are not familiar with what CCC is doing in this space, where we generally help publishers collect APCs along with all the other things that they need to collect, so page charges, color charges, and fairly soon member dues and things like that all go into this. We build this, so we're really talking about Gold Road, compliance with mandates and reporting, at least for Gold Road stuff that's flowing through us. So it's not everything, it's not every Green Road mandate coming through us. But the way we figure is it has to be integrated seamlessly into those editorial workflows so that those times in Rob's slide will start coming down, and they don't have to be so long because it's just part of the workflow and just clicking and paying a credit card and everything being tracked. It's got to be fueled by APIs. There's a lot of metadata that's going to be going around, that the funders need the metadata, the institutions need the metadata, everyone needs this. It's got to be driven by APIs and standard metadata, and I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing with others to try to standardize everything. And then you really need detailed transactional information. So you need to know, has something been paid? Has something not been paid? Where is it in the process? Where is it in the editorial process? Is everything done? When's this going to publish? So what we've done is, really plug in generally to the author workflow, and we usually do this through a collaboration either with an editorial office management system, so Aries or Scholar One, or for those large publishers who might have journals in 16 different EOS systems plus their own homegrown production systems, then we'll just, ping the production systems themselves. But the whole point is, at some point when the author submits, there's a lot of data that you can pick up. So not just the publication and ID, but you get the DOI, but you start to get the author's ID, the author's institution, and using things like the Ringgold identifier and the ORCID identifier, you can start pulling in information. So there is no way you would expect an ordinary researcher at an institution that's supposed to get a 50% discount on all of their APCs from publisher A to know about that. I mean, is a library going to send an alert every 5 minutes, hey, you get a 50% discount with publisher A, don't forget to tell them, call them up on the phone? Well, you've just, whatever the advantage of the discount, you've just completely negated by the fact that they now have to have this effort and track all of this stuff. So you really have to find a way to make this very, very easy for the author and just have it all driven by the standards. But then, once you have all the standards in place, and just go to my notes for 1 second, what standards are we talking about? So I've mentioned ORCID IDs, ISSNs, DOIs, Ringgold IDs, FundRef identifiers, because if you have the FundRef identifier, you can say, hey, you need to use a CC BY, or here's what your mandate is. And then we're working with organizations like CASRE, if you're familiar with them in Europe. We're really trying to define the metadata standards, even around the standards. So you have a CC BY as a standard license, or CC BY NC as a standard license, but how you're going to display that in a field so that everyone's API can pick it up and catch it, that's what we're doing now, and that's really where this is all going to get better, and Rob's slides are the times will shorten, hopefully not lengthen every time there's a new mandate. So, once you have this metadata, of course, you can aggregate it and you can show it to different people. So, this is what we've, sort of built. You've got now all this information. You've got the funder name through the FundRef identifier. You know who your institution is because you've got your Ringgold identifier. You've picked it up out of the ORCID. You've got the publication name. You've got the volume and issue data. You've got all this data, and now you can report it back to the institution. And this is really, where it needs to go. So, as of today, if you're a rights link for OA publisher, you can order this and, just say, for this institution, let's create this report. In the future, we'll be able to aggregate all of this, with the publisher consent. And, frankly, there's a lot more fields that the institution doesn't want. So there's a bit of a, curation process and what's relevant. But, the things that we can track here are not just the data you see, but we can also put in, I think, more than one research grant number. So you can have the funding grant number, and then you can have the internal grant number. Because the first thing we learned is we said, hey, we're going to put the grant number in, and the institution said, which grant number? We're like, how many grant numbers do you have? And they're like, well, at least two. One from, if Wellcome gives us a grant, that's their number, the NIH gives us a grant, but then we have our own internal number. And then you need to be, of course, able to resolve those internal numbers into the, the research management system, because that's where this all will end. Once you get everything talking to each other, you're kind of at the solution. So, and then the research, within the research grant, then you can see, it's been complied with, it's CC BY, we've passed that metadata on because we can pass the licensing metadata on. You can put your compliance rules into it. You can allow, from a publisher perspective, you can allow choice in license. So you can say, do you want a CC BY or a CC BY NC or no particular Creative Commons license? And then you can see, this is a Wellcome Trust grantee. So you can say, you check CC BY, but do you know that the Wellcome Trust wants you to use a CC? You choose CC BY NC, but Wellcome Trust wants you to use a CC BY. So you can build all of that into the workflow. So you don't have to educate the researcher in advance as to what all this means. You just say, this is what your funder requires. Click here. Done. If we rely on the authors to learn this stuff, it will fail. So I think I'm almost out of time, and I've spoken very quickly. And so I'll just leave this for questions.